Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a close look at Kaiju number 8 and a character who is just suddenly developing, but not suddenly developing because Matsumoto is a good writer. We are going to take a look at Screamy Scientist Guy, or Kurusu, as we now know his name to be. So, let's take a look at this character and why I'm so excited to find out what the final beat of his character art will be. You see, Matsumoto is a master of the 3 beats within 3 beats story arc. Matsumoto did it with the smiles and the mastery of Kafka's body, and now I see another 3-beat within 3-beat pattern that Matsumoto is building up centered around the Director General. The larger 3 beats are the 3 main relationships with living secondary characters that we've seen around the General, and each of these characters has a 3-beat arc within of increasing or decreasing focus depending on how important this character is to the story. The character arc goes something like this. We get a first quiet indication of a particular relationship to the General. Then we get a second beat where it shows us that this character actually has a deeper relationship with the General. And once you see the second beat, you can go back and look at the first beat and see the hints that the first beat was suggesting a deeper relationship than we saw on the surface. Then you get the third beat, the revelation of how important these characters are to the Director General and how important the Director General is to them and why. And it's a genuinely, superbly intense, emotional payoff to a very clever setup. Now, the first beat was Kikoru and her relationship with her father. The second beat was First Division Captain Jin Atami and his relationship with the Director General. And the third beat is now Screamy Scientist Guy, Kurusu, and his relationship with the General. And I am really, really excited to see how Screamy Scientist Guy's relationship with the General pays out and what other purpose Screamy Scientist Guy will be serving in the larger scheme of things. Let's take a look at the first beat. You have Kikoru, and her relationship with her father is first introduced as a very broken, harsh relationship between a daughter and a father, where the father was pushing her to achieve this goal. It was the inherited burden of her family. And he just seems like an incredibly harsh man who only focuses on his work and doesn't have time to consider his daughter's emotions. Then you get the second beat when Kikoru goes in to confront her father over Kafka. And you get that sudden startling slap to the face hint. It's a very intense hint. It's nothing really subtle about it, I guess, but I'm being contradictory there, but sometimes it does sound contradictory when you're describing the work of a great author. Where after being brutally chided when Kikoru had approached the Director General as an officer for not following protocol, for trying to go around the order of things, and she was being foolish as an officer in that moment. Kikoru should have known that Captain Ashiro would have already presented the Director General with all of their testimony, and that coming to the Director General as an officer would do Kafka no good and would possibly weaken her testimony by revealing sentiment. Even after that, even after Director General had deliberately stabbed at a personal wound in Kikoru, she turned around and called him Daddy and addressed him as her father, not as one officer to a commanding officer, but as a daughter to a father. And she did it in the most vulnerable way possible. Even after he had just hurt her, she turns around and she lays herself out to be vulnerable in front of him. This was the first hint that their real relationship wasn't nearly as broken and was actually a lot stronger than we thought it was at first. And looking back, you can see that her father is driving her to be stronger. Her father is dedicated to his job. and yet she kept going back to him, looking for that affirmation, like she sensed it just below the surface. Then the third beat happens when we see that final, it wasn't one moment, it was a series of moments. When he praises her after the battle in the late 40s chapters, when she responds to that praise, when she responds to the threat against him, and his final flashback showing that by nature, by his own tendencies, he is a very soft, caring, lovable, sentimental man, but in order to fulfill his dying wife's purposes, her plans, he hardened himself to ensure that Kikoru had what she needed to survive her own goals that she had set for herself. Because of that 3-step buildup, this was just a fantastic emotional payoff. Now the second step, the second beat in the larger 3-beat pattern was the general's relationship with Jin Narumi. And this is something that's slightly more interesting because we haven't fully seen the completion of the third beat. The third beat of the second beat has begun, but we haven't seen it. The first beat is, of course, when Narumi shows up in the chamber with General Director Iso Shinomaya and Kaiju number 8 and Kafka. And clearly there's companionable professional trust between them because Iso chose Jin to be his backup in that situation. Captain of the 1st Division, super strong, get in there with your big old honking rifle and bayonet and back me up. So we have the first beat of their relationship is that of a strictly professional relationship. The second beat comes when it's revealed what a slacker and slob Captain Gin Narumi is in his off time, and you have to wonder, why does a man like the Director General Shinomaya put up with that? And the obvious answer is that Jin's combat powers are so fantastic that they can't risk losing him. But Shinomaya, the way he handles the utter disrespect from Jin Narumi shows a deeper relationship. And looking back, looking back at the first beat from the perspective of the second beat, you can see how disrespectful Captain Narumi was and how calmly General Director Shinomaya responded to that, responding even with amusement. And so you see that these two men have a fairly deep relationship, and as we see more and more of them, it looks like, especially on Jin's end, the bond is incredibly strong between these two men, almost a father-son relationship. Now, just as we had the third beat for the Kikoru Iso was 2 beats, where Kikoru goes daddy at the end of the one chapter when she realizes he's in danger and spins around and goes to rescue him. And then the rest of the final beat was in the next chapter when we see the flashback to Kikoru's childhood and the revelation that he was a very soft, caring daddy to her before her mother died. We have that same setup for the third beat. At the beginning of chapter 50, Captain Narumi goes, "Just hang in there, Mr. Iso," which is a very intimate form of address. Should be calling him General Director, Commander, Director Shinomaya, something like that. But instead, he uses his first name, and it was translated as Mr., but it was probably a fairly personal Japanese honorific that it was translated from. I'd like to see the original translation on that. But this is the exact same scene as Kikoru saying daddy. And so and I think in the next chapter, or possibly the chapter after, we will get the backstory, the flashback from Gin's perspective that will show what General Director Shinomaya means to him. So Kikoru was beat 1 of the overarching arc, and those were her 3 beats, and we've seen all three of them. Captain Narumi was beat 2 of the overarching 3 beats, and we've seen the beginning of the third beat. So it's almost finished, and I'm really excited for the emotional punch that it's going to be when we find out exactly what General Director Shinomaya meant to Narumi. And now we have the third beat. Although technically Kurusu, or Screamy Scientist guy, was introduced before Captain Narumi. It was only a little bit before, and Captain Narumi's story, the second beats of Captain Narumi's arc, fleshed out before Kurusu's did. So anyway, you have, he's probably a doctor, so I'm going to call him Dr. Kurusu or Tech Kurusu. Anyway, the first interaction you see him, he's just a scientist guy providing the audience perspective to show us how unusual the situation is by emotionally reacting to what we, the audience, are seeing in the story. So that's his first purpose. He does that. Now, his second purpose is to fulfill this overarching 3 beats and 3 beats of secondary characters and their relationships to General Director Shinamaya, and showing who General Director Shinamaya is. We've seen who Director Shinamaya is in relationship to his family. We've seen who he is in relationship to his warriors. And now we're going to see who General Director Shinamaya is in relationship to the basically civilians, the technicians who can't defend themselves, who aren't his fellow superpowered fighters. Remember, I said Matsumoto is the master of the 3-beat pattern. So let's look at the 3rd beat of the relationship surrounding General Iso pattern that will show us how he interacts with civilians, not non-family civilians. And in the first interaction, again, it is a very harsh interaction at first glance. Screamy scientist guy yells at him, what are you doing? Don't go in there. It's too dangerous. This is when General Director Shinamaya is going in to talk to Kafka as Kaiju number 8. And the General Director turns around and just kind of smacks down his argument with a, have you forgotten who I am? A very intense scene. But once again, when we get to the second beat of this 3-beat section, you see a revelation of a deeper relationship that changes your perspective on the first beat. So Kurusu is the last tech to evacuate, announces that the evacuation was complete to the General Director. The General Director tells him to evacuate. And the Screamy scientist guy, who we know is terrified of this situation, has no combat ability, no armor to defend himself, shivers in terror, but does his duty, does his job, and says, I'm here to help you achieve victory, I'll back you up. And it wasn't just idle talk. Kurusu and his ability to manage the suit's biometrics from his computer have been critical to General Director Shinamaya. General Director Shinamaya would not have been able to hold his own in the fight with number 9 as long as he has without Kurusu backing him up. This is a classic example of the quiet courage of the background secondary character who's just quietly doing their job while the world falls apart around them. The classic example are the band members on the Titanic who continued to play as the Titanic sunk away underneath them. So here we have our first 2 beats of the 3rd beat in this triple 3-beat arc. You have Kurusu revealing that even if you look back at the very first interaction, Kurusu felt confident enough in his professional relationship with General Director Shinamaya that he was able to challenge General Director Shinamaya's decisions. Now, I don't know if you know how big a thing this is in Japanese culture. It's so big a thing that you do not challenge your superiors when they've made a decision, that certain Japanese companies have hired a designated American. It doesn't actually have to be an American, but their concept that Americans are always objecting to things that they have no right to object to and basically punching above their pay grade in the office have led them to bring in one person whose job it is to deliberately challenge the CEOs of the company if they start making stupid mistakes. So in Japanese culture, you don't challenge your superiors, especially if you're not just some random tech challenging the general director of your entire, in this case, military organization. But Kurusu felt confident enough in their relationship, confident enough in his own skills as a technician, as a scientist, to do just that. And that shows an incredible level of not just that it shows the relationship between Kurusu and General Director Shinomiya, but it shows that General Director Shinomiya has very deliberately cultivated a very healthy atmosphere of intellectual questioning in a military organization, which is unusual enough. And given that it's a Japanese military organization, it's super unusual. And so the fact that Kurusu was this coward, this shrinking, terrified guy who shivers at the slightest aggression somebody shows, felt confident enough to raise this objection, shows what an unusual man General Director Shinomiya is and how he's able to affect everyone around him, not just individuals. So you have that was the second beat, Kurusu showing his quiet courage, and now we're still waiting for the beginning of the third beat, that calling out the name right before something goes terribly wrong. And so I'm really excited to see the third beat for Kurusu because, again, Matsumoto is the master of the 3 beats and the 3 uses. There's a rule that nothing in your story should be doing less than 3 separate things. And with Kurusu, 1, he is the audience perspective. He lets us know on a pure scientific word of creator level that what is usual in this world and what is unusual, because anything that he's the scientist who's been hands-on, knuckle deep in everything kaiju related in this situation. So he's the one who's going to know what's strange and what's not strange, and his reactions tell the audience that. So Kurusu served from the very beginning as an audience perspective. His second purpose, his second use, was to serve in as the third beat of this 3-beat relationship situation that shows what kind of man General Director Shinomiya is. And I can't wait to see what his third use is, because I'm sure Matsumoto is going to use Kurusu to show us a third aspect of this world. And I'm really, really excited to see what that is. So that was my analysis of Screamy Scientist Guy, how he fits into the larger picture of all the relationships that circle around General Director Shinomiya and what we can expect to look forward to. So what do you think? Am I putting way too much thought into just a secondary character, or is Kurusu really going to be central to some other element of the plot going forward? Leave a comment below if you have any other ideas about Screamy Scientist Guy. Hit that like and subscribe. Check to make sure you're still subscribed, because YouTube will unsubscribe you if you're not looking. And go check out if you want something to fill the time until your next manga chapter drops. Go check out my books. Humans Are Weird. We Have the Data. We Took a Vote. And Humans Are Weird. I Have the Data. Available on Amazon and from the author if you want to follow the instructions on my website. So peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.